Richard Pope is going to be coming up to tell us about possibly the future, I presume. I don't know. He's talking about the politics of digital government.
Oh, sorry. Hello, my name is Richard Pope. I used to work for the UK Government Digital Service. I've spent the last year talking to governments around the world to try and understand how they're using digital in new ways, and to try and understand some of the new politics that's going to emerge around that. Because digital government's no longer about putting paper forms on the internet. It's increasingly about changing how the work of government is organised and how people understand the work that their government does. It is increasingly manifests itself to people via digital services. So in India, the Aadhaar identity platform is now used by 1 billion users, and it's connecting data together from across government and triggered an entirely novel, for India anyway, privacy debate around that. In the US, the Veterans Administration has started to open up APIs that allow all charities and other organisations to build on top of governments to offer services directly to veterans. Government can also offer its own services. In Estonia, they are beginning to design services which are designed around life events, like having a child or moving house. And they're able to do that because they've built common data infrastructure that allows them to build those things really simply. They also share that infrastructure with neighbouring countries, so trades become easier. And in the UK, we're increasingly abstracting away government services of the gov.uk platform. You don't really see the mention of government departments on there. We're kind of, good design is masking that away from people. So what we're seeing is this, I think, the reorganisation of the work of government around a network of shared components like gov.uk, of APIs like the Veterans Association example, and canonical datasets like the Aadhaar identity example. And hopefully that gives the public better services, like we hope, but it also raises some quite big fundamental political questions. And I think these are going to be some of the public policy questions for the coming age. Pause. There we go. And that's because digital government's creating new spaces for political contests. And I'll give you some examples of what I mean by this in a minute. But it's the idea that digital is not inert, it's creating new spaces where we can have, and increasingly are having, political debates. And I'm going to talk through a couple of examples of these. So, in a world where we have shared platforms across government, like the Aadhaar example, like the gov.uk example, the organisations running those are incredibly powerful. You know, we think today about the Treasury as a powerful organisation. In the future, organisations that run these platforms are going to be important. With services built on top of shared APIs, shared infrastructure, the idea of central versus local becomes really blurred. We're going to have digital services that are offered kind of a mix of central and local. Similarly, the old division between like public and private provision of services is beginning to disappear. So in the States, there's a website called recreation.gov where you can go and book a campsite on a bit of federal land. You can also do it using a private company at the same time, same underlying APIs. With this comes the risk of the disintermediation of government. And we're kind of maybe seeing this a bit with some NHS services. So some services move online, private companies offer a public face to a service, but what does that do for government accountability? It's also getting faster to develop digital services. Our legislation still changes every 5 years, every 10 years. When design changes can be made to public services really quickly, what does that mean for accountability? And what does it mean for how people understand their government as we abstract away the details of individual departments and the actual workings of government? Will people feel able to hold politicians to account if they're not able to understand the structure of government? Who decides, in this world of kind of data-driven government, who decides what data gets joined up, and for what purpose? We've already seen in this country the joining together of data between the Home Office and the NHS. And this risks a genuine trust. This creates a genuine trust question around government. How will we trust government? What do we need to put in place to make sure people are able to trust digital services? One answer well be we need to start looking at new institutions. So what are the institutions that are going to look after really fundamental things like identity systems and data vision systems? Do we need a set of BECs for the next generation? Who's going to run these things? Who are they going to be accountable to? I've mentioned really quickly the idea of Estonia sharing platforms with some neighbouring countries. There's an emergent kind of foreign policy questions, some of these things, as digital makes it easier or harder for countries to trade with each other. Or countries start, as we're seeing maybe with China and the Belt and Road Initiative, forcing technology on other countries. So what we're seeing emerging here, I think, is not a world where technology is inert, but where technology creates new political questions that we need to start answering.